The Spirit mod, a mystical land that greets you with new bosses, new biomes, and most importantly, new weapons. On this journey, I make new friends, kill new monsters, and even go on quests. Will I be able to beat every boss that comes my way, or will I end up as another grave on the ground? I started this playthrough like I do with every other one, by getting wood. I had absolutely no clue what this mod had in store for me, so in order to figure that out, I went mining. In one of the wooden chests, I found this book called The Beginner's Guide to Armor that quite literally lists all of the beginning of the game armors that one should consider using. After a while of mining, I died to an ice bat. Once I respawned, I began to build a house due to the fear I have of the first night. On day 2, I checked to see what I could make with the materials that I already had. I ended up making a wooden club, which was extremely slow, an overgrowth staff, which is a summon that shoots little leaf-like things, I think, and a set of stone armor. The stone armor allowed me to fall significantly faster. Later that night, the guide kept pissing me off because his dumbass kept opening the doors and letting monsters inside. The next day, I began making NPC housing to see if I could find any of the new NPCs added by the Spirit mod. After the housing was done, I went to go exploring and shortly realized that getting around in this world was going to be very difficult with the equipment I currently had. Also, while I was exploring, take a look at these corrupt enemies. They are weird as hell. On day 4, I began looking for the Briar, one of 3 new biomes that were added. I started on the right side and found that I had no right ocean at all, which is really fucking weird. Anyways, it took me a while to get all the way to the edge of the right side, so I gave up looking for the Briar for now to instead start my hellevator, and I did a lot of mining while doing this. On day 5, I made a frigid spine bow, which worked well for the time being. I also made a stopwatch to keep track of the days better. I kinda sorta made magic storage as well, but only the chest aspect of it, not the crafting aspect. I forgot to hit record for days 6 through 8, so here's a little rundown. I spent all of day 6 continuing the hellevator and mining. On day 7, I found the Briar and this cool little tower in it that houses an NPC called the Gambler. It also had this wand called the Shadowbreak wand, and it's pretty fire. On day 8, I made gold armor and ended the day with making the Slime King spawner. On day 9, I defeated the Slime King and defeated the Eye of Cthulhu. While fighting the Eye of Cthulhu, I found this weird looking cloud in the sky that seemed to have some sort of egg on it or something. So on day 10, I went to investigate this cloud and accidentally spawned a boss called the Ancient Avian, and I obviously lost. Later on in the day, I spawned the Eater of Worlds and used the magic mirror right away in hopes that it would follow me home, but it didn't and it just despawned. Honestly, I was starting to get sick of bosses, so I went back to the Briar to explore the underground portion of it. It was very creepy, but there were chests everywhere. I found the Adventurer NPC and was also able to find and kill the Glade Wraith, one of the mini-bosses. At the very bottom of this was a sort of arena with an altar-like structure in the middle. After messing with it, I accidentally spawned the Vinerath Bane and lost. The next day, I made more housing to accommodate for all the new NPCs I kept finding. Later on, a stupid-ass goblin army spawned, so I had to deal with that. There was this goblin named the Necromancer in it, and it was a pain in the ass to kill every single time. Every single time I killed that Necromancer, a new one would spawn. It was awful. But the Necromancer dropped these things called tech drives that, once the goblin army was about halfway through, I used to make a few weapons with. The weapon I stuck with was called the Coil Pistol due to its fire rate. Afterwards, I made more storage. On day 12, I continued the hellevator, but once I got bored, I began preparing for the Eater of Worlds fight. Later that night, a blood moon arose, and it spawned all sorts of weird-ass enemies, from fast-ass fleshhounds to these tall-ass skeleton brutes. During this, I decided to get some adventurer quests done, because I had never done a quest in Terraria, and I thought it sounded cool. But they never yielded anything of use. The only cool thing that I got were these paintings from each and every quest. On day 13, I defeated Scarabus. but he didn't drop anything of use. Later on, I defeated the Eater of Worlds, and I just made the usual stuff that I, usually make, that everybody usually makes from him. Later that night, I finally finished making my magic storage. The next day, I sought out to take my revenge on the Vinerath Bane for making me look like a fool, so I tidied up the arena and began the fight. But I lost, because how was I supposed to know there's a second phase of the boss? Just before finishing up the hellevator on day 15, I found this underground castle that had guards guarding a chest. After murdering them in cold blood, I opened the chest and got just about nothing other than the summon item that I barely used at all. Once I finished up the hellevator, hell literally started to break due to the absurd amount of water I was currently draining into it. It was fucking crazy. Hell became flooded literally out of nowhere. But I just ignored it and got my hellstone. Due to how mystical this mod seemed, I felt like it was only appropriate to become a magic user, so on day 16 I spent some time researching weapons. I found this staff that I wanted, so I went and got cryolite ore in order to make the cryo staff. I also made cryolite armor because it gives a lot of defense. On day 17 I made a bunch of mana potions. I also spent a lot of time figuring out how to do all the moon jelly stuff. I ended the day by starting the ancient avian fight. In the morning of day 18 I defeated the ancient avian. After this, I felt like I was finally ready to take my revenge on the Vinerath Bane. The Vinerath Bane had finally been defeated, and to celebrate this triumph, I also defeated the Jelly Wizard. I killed a lot of bosses on this day. Day 19 consisted of research on various weapons and using these things called mystical dice that quite literally just teleport you to these shrines so that you can get more black rock in order to make more mystical dice so that you can go to more shrines and repeat the process. Oddly enough though, I found it very fun. Later that night, I went to go fight the Skeletron, but I died to fucking fall damage along the way. It was very embarrassing. On day 20, I made the arena for the Skeletron and defeated it. Afterwards, I started to explore the dungeon to see if there was anything new. The next day, I continued to explore the dungeon and found pretty much nothing. I knew that the Darkcasters dropped a weapon called the Skull Spray Staff that I really wanted, but I spent almost all day farming for it and couldn't get it, so I just gave up. On day 22, I decided I wanted to do the tide event, but I couldn't do it because I have no ocean on either side of my map, which means I couldn't get the coral I needed for the spawner. I was obviously very upset and did nothing on this day. Hey guys, future Oklah here, and at the end of the video I make a new world to do the tide event, so stick around for that. On day 23, I farmed enemies for slagstone in order to make the slag breath, which was an awesome weapon. Afterwards, I went to the new asteroid field biome. While I was up there, I killed 2 star dancers to get energized metal so that I can make the Starplate Voyager spawner. Once that was done, I gathered up all of my potions, made a mana flower, built an arena, and started my battle with the Starplate Voyager. The Starplate Voyager had been defeated, on the first try by the way, so afterwards I began mining Astrolite shards. I continued mining Astrolite shards into the next day. Once I was done mining, I made 2 weapons, the Astral Convergence, that was alright I guess, and the 100 Crack Fist, that was really fire. I finished off my day by starting the Hell Highway. On day 25, I finished the Hell Highway. The first time I fought the Wall of Flesh, I lost because I was using the 100 Crack Fist, a solo enemy weapon, versus the Slag Breath, a crowd weapon. I tried again using the Slag Breath and defeated it no problem. Later, I mined some altars for the Hardmode ores. On day 26, I got through all of the Hardmode ore stuff, including a new staff per ore. I personally thought the Adamantite staff ended up being the best. As soon as I opened the game for day 27, a Mystic Moon happened. This event was pretty weird and the frogs were unbelievably strong. Later on, I decided to up my arsenal, so I defeated the Wall of Flesh to get the Sorcerer Emblem and reforged all of my weapons. I ended the day farming for putrid pieces so that I can make the Necropolis staff. On day 28, I made the Necropolis staff, and it was honestly a waste of my damn time. I spent the rest of the day looking for an Anklet of the Wind. After a little bit of looking, I found one the next day and made lightning boots. I also made the spell tomb called the Festering Grimoire, and it sucked. Later that day, I made Infernon spawner, used it, and lost to him. On day 30, I tried a few more times, but I either lost to him or ran too far away and made him despawn. So I instead went to defeat the Destroyer, and it was literally the easiest boss fight I've ever done to date. Just take a look at this. I have a hole in the ground and I just shoot down. He doesn't do anything to attack me at all. On day 31, I made the Hollowed Staff, and I really wanted this weapon to be good, but it just wasn't. Later on, I began looking for the Spirit biome that spawns after at least one mechanical boss has been defeated. I eventually found it and began farming the enemies for ethereal embers and ancient runes. And let me tell you, this shit took me a while. I spent all of day 32 farming these enemies, but at the end of the day, I was finally able to make the rune armor and this fucking amazing weapon called the Spirit Rune. I spent all of day 33 in the Underground Spirit to get Spirit Ore. On day 34, I made a bunch of cool looking weapons, but they were all ass in comparison to the Spirit Rune. Later, I began farming for another Sorcerer Emblem so that I could have both a Sorcerer Emblem and this thing called Yura's Will equipped, I think that's how you pronounce it. On day 35, I made Nether Wings and got another Sorcerer Emblem. The next day, I went on another boss murder spree. I started by annihilating Infernon. Shortly after, I began making the Twins Arena, and once that was done, I defeated the Twins and defeated the Dusk King. I wanted to continue defeating bosses the night prior, but I ended up running out of time, so most of day 37 was spent messing around, including an embarrassing loss to the Old One's army. Later that night, I defeated the Skeletron Prime. On day 38, I got a shit ton of Chlorophyte and used it to make Chlorophyte armor and upgraded the Phantom Arc to the Arcan Seal. I spent days 39 through 40 making the Plantera Arena because I will never lose to a stupid ass plant. On day 41, I beat the Plantera. Once I stomped that plant, I headed straight for the dungeon to get Ectoplasm. I then used the Ectoplasm to make 3 weapons, the Darkstar Lantern, which was pretty fire, the Plague Skulls, which was cool that it used no mana, but other than that it did no damage, and the Blood Boil, which was just right in the middle. It was a good weapon damage wise, but the range was very small. I spent the next 2 days looking for the Jungle Temple, and I don't know why it took me so long, I just could not find it. On day 44, I defeated the Golem, though it was a very close fight. Afterwards, I went to do some events to see if anything was new, but I just couldn't find much. The next day, I defeated the Lunatic Cultist and started the Lunar events. For the pillars, I added a boss health bar mod to better keep track of how many more enemies I have to kill. I continued the Lunar event on day 46 and started making an asphalt path. On day 47, I finished all of the pillars and very quickly made 2 whack-ass weapons that turned out to be pretty ass. Thanks to these weapons, I lost to the Moonlord. I spawned him in again, but still lost. I figured I should probably make better armor, so I went for Spectre armor. I spent the next 2 days redoing the Lunar events. Once that was done, I defeated the Moonlord. On day 50, I noticed that I completely skipped over a boss named Atlas, so I swiftly took care of him. At this point, I was done with the Spirit mod, but there was one more thing I had to do first. The Tide. Okay, so I know I said I was going to do the Tide event here at the end of the video, but when I made a new world, there was no ocean on either side again for whatever fucking reason, so I had to install the cheat sheet mod so I could spawn in whatever, and after spawning in the thing to, start the Tide event, it was just a bunch of coconuts. I was just fighting a bunch of coconuts, like the ones from Moana. That was the shit that I was fighting the entire time. It was the lamest event I've ever done. Anyways, I know this video wasn't all that, exciting or anything, but I appreciate those of you who did watch until the end. Thank you very, very much. I will see you soon.